Ladies and gentlemen, here we are once again with the D-Load, and I'm your host, SLC Sean L. Christ, owner of Valor and Venom Productions, and of course, finally, since he's done with work, I am joined by the American treasure, the icon, Paul Leonard. And today, we have a pretty cool show for you guys here, because not only are we going to be interviewing one of our good friends, but he is also a two-time athlete in the strength sports, because we have THEE Troy Shanks coming up, where he's not only an official for powerlifting, but he's also a strongman competitor. So, without further ado, let me go ahead and get us up on the screen here. And there we are. Welcome, boys.
Hey,
welcome.
So, we've been trying to get Troy in here for a minute because it is pretty interesting, and I think the way that strongman is kicked off here in Arizona, especially, and also for powerlifting in Arizona over the past at least 5 years that I've seen, it's a staple for strength. You know, if you're on the East Coast, you have, Ohio, you have Boston, you have the West Side guys, you have all those big group of guys down there. But here on the West Coast, I guess it gets a bad rap. Like, they think that California is more like bodybuilding and stuff like that. So there's really not that much, a lot of strong like gyms out here. So how would you guys go ahead and feel about that, for maybe Arizona being pretty much the hot spot for strength sports here?
I definitely think that it's definitely becoming the hot spot for sure. Just the amount of athletes that we have going to the national level, and in both strongman and powerlifting, they're getting talked about a lot, and you obviously, there's more people in California, so you're obviously, just the ratio, you're going to have more people in the sport out there. But I think our level of athlete is definitely peaking the top for the West Coast.
What do you think about that, Paul?
I believe Troy's a longer time resident of Tucson than myself, but I've been here since '08. So when I first got to town, there was no strongman in Tucson. It became some strongman contests up in Phoenix, and there was a little powerlifting here, but mostly it was in Phoenix. And now, I mean, there's a strongman contest in this state monthly. Our gym at Beast Strong Powerhouse hosts 3 a year. We always have one in May. We have Static Monsters in October, and then we have one in December, which you're both very familiar with. Troy has already competed 3 times. He's taken a plane. He's at that level. He's taken a plane for competition. So he went over to the Pro-Am in Texas, he'll speak to, and he took a long car ride to California to compete in California's Strongest Man, I was lucky enough. I started that 20 years ago. Now it's grown to the point where I believe Troy had 20 people in his class. It was always popular, but between strongman opportunities and powerlifting and the gyms that have grown here in Tucson and Phoenix, as well as Flagstaff, we have allies up there, and Yuma. I go over to Yuma sometimes for work. There's 3 excellent gyms over there. So there's so many facilities and competitions, and now as a result, there's athletes. So we're Arizona's never been more popular for strength sports than they are right now.
And Troy, you being out here, are you pretty much been out here your whole life, or are you from a different state?
I'm from Oregon originally, but my family moved me out to Tucson fifth grade, I think it was, 5th or 6th grade. So I've been here, long enough. I just claim it as home. So
and what's like? Well, you have to because you live here. So basically, you growing up. I mean, I've seen some pictures where you were pretty much a skinny dude, man. Like you're skinny. I mean, you're probably about 165. Am I kind of correct on those numbers?
Yeah, absolutely. Graduated high school, I think I was 180.
So I think I was 185 in the 3rd grade. If I look back at the pictures.
Yeah.
Well, so like you growing up, and obviously, I want you to talk about kind of like your childhood and how you got into it, but what made you, I guess, pretty much dive headfirst into this strength community? And you originally are what you consider yourself a powerlifter, is how you kind of started off, and then you kind of moved over to strongman, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to childhood, I was, we grew up kind of in a small town. Wasn't very many people. I mean, small enough that me and my buddy would ride our riding lawnmowers on the side of the freeway down to the corner store. It was, everybody knew everybody type. So worked worked on the land there. We had a good chunk of land, and then my dad owned a construction company, so kind of always worked with my hands that way. And then once we moved to Tucson, I was into a lot of BMX, skateboarding, that kind of stuff. I didn't.
That's awesome.
It wasn't until probably mid high school that I got into some weights, and that was just for sports, really. I did football and wrestling in high school, so it was pretty much just for sports purposes. Like most high schoolers back then, and probably now today, thought I knew what I was doing. Thought I knew everything about lifting and getting stronger and bigger. And it wasn't until probably 2008 when I got deployed. That's when I got really into the gym and like seriously. I joke that's the same year my daughter was born. So I joke that once she was born, I wanted to be the biggest and strongest dad at the PTA. So I think I'm holding it. So luckily for that. But yeah, and then honestly, got into bodybuilding after I got back from deployment. Kind of got into bodybuilding. Always followed the bodybuilding scene.
Did you really? I never knew that.
Yeah. I mean, I never competed or anything. I was washed out before I ever started. So. But actually, the how I got into strength sports, a buddy of mine and a local legend to many, Christian Hanneberg, he was in the gym one day, LA Fitness over off of Wilmot, and we were just messing around, and I think I deadlifted 405, and I was like, is that a pretty good deadlift? Because he had been doing strongman since high school, and we're a couple years removed outside of that at the time, and he goes, yeah, man, that's not bad. He's like, there's females at my competitions doing that weight, so you're doing good. And I was like, what? Like, this was a huge moment for me. What are you talking about?
Oh my God.
So he told me, he's like, man, come on, come train over at the gym I train at, which at the time was CrossFit Works down on Broadway in Tucson down there. And now it's since changed names, and now it's 244. And Chris and Leslie own it now. Back then it was Sam, Chris, and that owned it. But yeah, so went over there and quickly realized I was not strong. So he kind of fit me into his training schedule and mentored me along, and did my first strongman competition 2013. I did Arizona Strongest Man. Placing's not important on that one, okay? So
you learned.
Yeah, I went down to the 231s. So I had cut more than 20 pounds. Yeah, because by that time, when I got back from Iraq, I was 240.
Right.
So cut down to the 231. So it was like a 20-something pound cut. Didn't know what I was doing for the cut. So came in completely fatigued. It was outside at the Tilted Kilt up in Phoenix. It was miserable. Great learning experience. Did one more contest that year. The Wildcat Strongman, took third in that one. And that's I had the bug at that point, and I just wanted to keep going. Scott Porter had the NAS chair seat at the time, and it kind of died out for competition wise. So that's when I transitioned into powerlifting. So then I got into powerlifting because, like Paul was saying, there was a powerlifting comp. At that time, it was, every 3 months, but still, more often enough that I could kind of get behind it and get excited for it. Did that until 2020, until I came back into strongman.
So you were pretty much a fan of strongman, and that's what you saw yourself doing, but you just didn't have any place really to go and just basically see how you can compared to the last event that you did.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of sucks because back then I wasn't strong. I wasn't, looking back, I wasn't as strong as I thought I was. I think if I would have kept on that trajectory, I would have been. But at the time, I was a better power lifter for the local scene. So that stroked my ego a little bit better, than traveling out of state, or north and getting killed in a contest. So.
Well, yeah, but I think it's funny because you started off at, you thought you had this like a pinnacle career, like, oh my gosh, the first thing is great. And literally you had somebody be like, that's cute, dude. Like, what else are you going to do? Which is literally what it is in this community, which I love.
Oh,
And sometimes rubs people the wrong way, but it really is a competitive atmosphere, because why would you be doing this if you don't want to better yourself every single time you're on a platform?
absolutely.
I think we've all had those moments where we jumped in head first and we're like, oh, sucked. Learned a lot. Let's go ahead and regroup and try this over again. I mean, Paul, is that not pretty much kind of like how would you agree that how you kind of started out as well? Just basically you learn from your failures, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, 100%. And what Troy said, a lot of, you hear from a lot of people when they going into their first competition, they'll look at what records or their weight class, and they, rather than just go in and compete at what you are, because you're training how you feel. But like we can all relate to, though, I have so much respect for anybody that competes, because there are a lot of people that go in, they're legends in their own mind, they're uneducated. Maybe now the internet's changed that a lot, right? People see on Instagram and so forth, you see these ridiculous freaks, but until you go to a competition, actually see what's out there, you don't know. But there are not, 9 out of 10 people go to a one their first time, get spanked, and never go back, sadly, which shouldn't be the way. You should take it as a learning experience. And, I like to say I have so much respect. And as we said, Troy's a dual sport athlete, but like take, for example, Thor won World's Strongest Man. And then he decided he wanted to go for the all-time powerlifting total record and ran a meet at his gym, and he didn't get it, but Thor's, then he went on to boxing. So, you're not going to excel at a strength sport the first time. Chances are you're not going to go into it and break a world record in either strongman or powerlifting. The talent pool is too deep. But like I like to tell people, if you don't ever step on the platform or sign up or do a strongman contest, this is your total. This is your score sheet. Like, you got to start someplace. And, I'm more proud of the people that do it and inch their way up and make progress. And then we're all peers. And that's why when you're around strong people, they respect each other, because you've been there. You're so humble, and you have to humble yourself to compete. And Troy's a perfect example. I haven't seen all Troy's competitions, but at this latest show at Ubu, he went into it and he had never been familiar with the block implement. And, him and I looked at it, I was like, man, that's it is what it is. And, Troy, a lot of people didn't do so well in that implement, but Troy used that. Hey, that's one implement. I'll never see that again. And it was challenging. It was slick. He went on to smoke the show after that. That's what you have to do. Like you learn, a lot of people that come from team sports, football, wrestling, whatever, the coach always tells you, hey, that's one play. Same thing in strength sports. Hey, man, you have one bad event. That's why there's 5 or 6 events. You can make it up. And, sometimes you do see an implement or something that you hadn't seen before, but use it as a learning experience. And Troy's perfect example of that.
But I guess I asked you a question, Troy, you talked about how you went in the strongman, now you transitioned to powerlifting. Did you take any of the aspects you learned from the strongman sport and then move it into powerlifting? Or did you pretty much just learn from the ground up? And what was your path after you got into the powerlifting scene?
No, I would say that I kind of took some of those principles that I had learned from the strongman side. I kept a lot of the strongman implements in the program as much as I could, because I am a firm believer, like it transfers both ways. I think, if you can walk with a 1,000-pound yoke on your back, you can squat 700 pounds. You'll be fine. So it's not a direct correlation, but it is. The building blocks, the CNS, taxation and everything. I think it carries over well. So, my strongman style is more heavy all the time. I rarely do back off training.
Right.
And I took that into powerlifting. And when I took that into powerlifting, I really did. I got better quickly, and when I chose those 3 events, and then I kind of have an accessory style that I have that I think really benefits myself. And I have some clients that are on the same type of program, building on their weaknesses, but that accessory training I had in strongman and powerlifting, I think is really beneficial.
Is that something that you learn along the way, the accessory training? Because I know you see a lot of guys out there and athletes in the sports where they're like, oh, we just train like one thing, just bench all the time. I'd be a big bencher. Where as you really do this, you realize is that pretty much the accessory training is just as important as doing the actual hardcore lift, because that's letting your body get used to it.
Yeah, I would argue to an extent that the accessory training is more important than training that big three. The big three or any strongman implement, the reason why I train those is so I know how the event feels, and so I know what weight I can push on it, right? So it's a confidence builder. But I think the accessories are more important. And that's one thing I tell people, like, do your main, and I always do the main event first and then move into accessories. That way you're just fresh for the first event, but those accessories have to get done.
Is that kind of like with your training, Paul, or how would you say when you were in competition for doing that? Did you train similar, or did you have your own take on it?
Well, I learned along the way. I started off traditional progressive overload through college and into my early 20s, and I got up to a 1,600-pound total at 242, and that was back in the old ADFBA, which is drug tested. Then I kind of stuck, and I transitioned to moving to California. Long story short, I found the Westside tapes after a couple years, and Louis Simmons and Westside Barbell opened my eyes with the idea of the conjugate system of doing different exercises. And like Louis says, there's a million exercises, but you just got to find the 5 to 10 that work for you. For me, it was Zercher squats and kneeling squats. There were different variations of the traditional lifts that really made my strength take off. And they're also coincided with, for a couple of years, I didn't have regular partners. So I'm sure Troy will agree. One of the keys to getting stronger is always finding stronger people to train with. You might not be able to do it all the time, and maybe they're not all up to your strength level, but try to find people that are dedicated trying to get better. That's a key. But yeah, like Troy's relating to, like when he uses the word accessories, to me, that's the same thing as saying like Westside conjugate. Like if my floor press goes up and my close grip incline went up, then my bench press went up. But at the same time, you're not suffering the law of accommodation of I benched heavy every week for 52 weeks and my bench went stale, because you don't, after past intermediate, you don't progress linearly. You gotta feed your body stimulus, but it's gotta, in my case, I found out it was very advantageous to do it differently, including chains and bands and different resistance curves, and change exercises up and challenge your body, but at the same time, don't burn it out, if that makes sense.
No, that's the thing, because we had Vinny on here earlier, and he was kind of talking about the same stuff, is that you gotta train your style that you're comfortable. And that's not saying you don't want to come outside of your comfort zone, because sometimes you have to, but it's just, you got to find what works for you. And then pretty much going forward, you pretty much, you take a little bit here, a little bit there from other people, and then you pretty much make your own toolbox. And that's what you use to build yourself up better, stronger. And I think in ways it just, I don't know, it just helps you out in the long run. At least that's my opinion. Now, I'm not professional like you guys. I mean, Troy, you've been doing pretty much strength sports since you said 2013, and Paul, God knows how many events you've been to. The one thing I will the one thing I'm not trying to say the negative. The one thing I will say is what are some of the things, Troy, that I guess you have learned along the way that you want to give advice to somebody that's looking to start into it, that maybe dabbles into it, and basically they just want to get their feet wet? What would you say to them?
Always be coachable. Honestly, you have to. As soon as you think you know everything, you know nothing, right? So as long as you can come into the gym and take critiques, I think Paul's talked on it a little bit earlier. We can take advice and critique from somebody who maybe isn't as strong as us, maybe isn't as big or whatever it is, and we can still take that advice, try it out, and it may be able to work. We got some really small dudes that are really strong. So, judge the book by the cover. You won't read that book, but there's a lot to learn in it, so definitely be coachable, but get uncomfortable. Too many people come in and they'll start training with us, and they get sore, and then they stop working out because well, we're sore, but now we have this career-ending, back injury, let's say, and you're like, no, you're just sore from the workout because there's a lot of load on that lower back on yoke or whatever, right? But they think it's a career-ending, because they've never felt that discomfort before,
Right.
So be uncomfortable, be smart, but pain is part of the process, unfortunately, and I'm sure Paul can talk on it. It never ends. That's the sadist in all of us that, it's painful every day you go in. I'm gonna get up out of this chair when we're done, and it's gonna be painful. It's just the way it is. I hit legs pretty hard last night, and I'm still feeling it. So that's a positive thing. Take it as a positive. So those three things: don't know everything. Be a sponge for those around you. Be uncomfortable and kind of push past it all.
Is that what you guys say too as well, Paul? Just basically the same kind of similar thing what Troy was just saying.
Yeah. When Troy says be coachable, I love this sport. I love both sports. I love strength culture. I love the gym culture. So, like, you'll realize that super strong people are usually very humble. You just never want to waste their time. Like, if they take the time to explain something to you, and then, like, I think there's a term Troy used once. I was talking with him a while back about assholes. Like, they'll search for their answer, and then you'll tell them, no, I'd go this way or this way. I'm a big fan of telling people to read too. I'm a big reader. There's a lot of free information out there. Louis Simmons stuff is still free. And as you know, like at bodybuilding.com, I got 5 articles I published on there. I'm excited that they just sold that site. So I might try to get us back on there. I'm hoping, but there's a lot of good free information out there, basic rudimentary things. And then somebody like Troy's Instagram, THEE Troy Shanks 275, myself. A lot of people share a lot of free information and just observe and say, well, what works for you? But man, if someone takes the time to help you, be appreciative, be humble, listen to what they have to say, and certainly don't waste their time, because that somebody that's really serious into strength training that's the one resources we don't have. We have a finite amount, and we'll only help you so much per se. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So Troy, moving forward with your career, so you started doing the powerlifting. Now you became an official, correct?
For powerlifting?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, USPA. I'm in the national level ref now.
How did you get into that? Because now you started off with the strongman. You did your powerlifting, and then once you started your powerlifting, about how many powerlifting, I guess, competitions have you been to? And what was pretty much the difference? Because in your record, it shows on there that you've done raw and you've also done wrapped. And I think that's maybe something that people don't realize what powerlifting is. There is like a bunch of different categories than just, I'm going in here, I'm gonna do the 3 big lifts, because it's totally different on the body. I'll tell you that right now. I don't think I will ever do a squat without my knees at least being sleeved. I mean, that's just not happening at my age.
No, it's that's mitigating that pain,
Yeah.
longevity,
Yeah.
strength sports is a marathon, a lot of people don't realize that, but being smart. And that's actually exactly what the change was. I did some raw, and my numbers were good, decent enough for my age and my time in the game. But it got painful. And one of my buddies, Ricky Eisen, he was like, hey man, try some knee wraps. Got into them and loved them. Loved the way they felt. Loved the comfort. The mental comfort. Of them. They're very uncomfortable, but the mental comfort from them. Knowing that my knee is not going to blow out the side. 600 pounds on your back is a great thing. So, got into those, and then I think for the most part, my last few years. So yeah, like my first one was 2013. So then my last one, when did we do the lumberjack? Was that 21?
We did 21 May 6th,
yeah.
actually.
Yeah, so what is that, 8 years that I went? I couldn't tell you how many comps I did. I honestly couldn't. There was a point in time where I was kind of doing maybe one a year, for a couple of years. I was going through an academy at one point, so I didn't push through it at that time. And And then there's some years where I got crazy, just like last year with the strongman stuff,
Jesus.
where it was, you know, out of one comp, and that was just the prep for the next one.
Right. It's
So
what you were telling me. You're like, yeah, I'm gonna do this one, just get ready for this. And it's like, what?
yeah. So I couldn't tell you. I'd have to go back and count the medals. Luckily, I've medaled at every powerlifting comp I've ever done, so I can count the medals to see how many I've done. You know, and strongman's kind of becoming the same way. I don't know how many I've done this year. Last year was insane. 2020 was my first year back. Yeah, because I got my my bicep. I ruptured my bicep coming into 2020. It was actually New Year's Eve coming into 2020. So I had the surgery January 9th and competed July 3rd of that year. So
I remember that.
July 3rd, 2020. That's when I claim to have started in the sport, because like I said, back in 2013, I did 2 strongman comps, but I did not know what I was doing. And but yeah, back to the powerlifting. 2016, Melinda and Asa Barnes came to me, and for the ones that don't know, they're kind of the parents of powerlifting, I would say, of creating what it is today in Arizona. They've done a phenomenal job. I think they legitimately hold a contest. It's almost monthly right now.
It seems like it. Sure. It really does.
Yeah, I think it's almost monthly that they're holding on to. They came to me back then. They were with was it APF? I believe it was APF. They went to APF for a little bit and asked me to be a ref for them. So took the exam, got the ref card, and well, then they held on to that for 6 months, I think, right? And then went over to USPA, and they were like, "Hey, can you be a ref for the USPA now?" So I went through that whole process, and you know, there's requirements to it. I do appreciate that about the USPA. You have to have a certain amount of meets competed in, and then the testing process is quite lengthy. You know, the written, then the practicals, and then you know all that. So, and then when you progress from state level to national level, there's another test that you've got to do that grades you on a totally different aspect of the sport. And then the same thing, you got to have a certain number of national level meets refed, and then you can go international if you pass that test. So I do want to go international. I have this issue where I've just got to have the highest title I can of anything I get myself into. So I'm actually like Paul was saying earlier, I'm competing in October, so that'll be the first one. I think you have to compete every 2 years. I think it is. I've got to look at the requirements, because I think I've got to compete every 2 years to keep my status current as well, because they're trying to get away from the ways of yesteryear, we'll say, of, you know, these old guys who haven't competed in 45 years sitting there judging you, and you're like, you can't squat to parallel to get on the toilet, let alone asking me, you know. So I do appreciate that about the USPA these days. So Steve's doing a great job and really trying to make it a quality organization, and I think they're, in my opinion, they're surpassing any other federation that's out there right now.
I think you know them personally, don't you, Paul?
Oh, Steve Dennison? Yes. Yeah, he's a contemporary of mine. We were able to compete head to head multiple times, and if you think I love powerlifting, then Steve's it's his baby. I mean, he's seen a million more meets. He's administered it. You could always count. When I first moved to California, you could always count. It was back then. It was the USPF. He was affiliated. He was never the national president, but he was the state chairman, and he did fantastic things with that sport. I mean, that you would come the first of the year before the internet, you'd get a mailer, a letter in the mail with all the meets that were planned. There would always be a bench meet at Venice Beach, a push-pull meet at Venice Beach, and a deadlift only. We would compete at car shows, but there are also the state championships. Steve was with he was in the military. I believe he retired as a major with the Army National Guard. So a lot of our meets were like on the Army base. The one that gets my YouTube play when I went up against him and Mike O'Hearn, that was the 1995 USPF California States at El Toro Air Force Base, and there was a who's who. There was 20 powerlifting Hall of Famers there, from Terry McCormick, Dave Shaw, etc. So Steve always did the top-notch locations, and they were always administered. He bleeds powerlifting. I mean, and he runs a great show, and he's a very strong man today. And he had in 95, he went, his highest placing at the Nationals was second in 95 in that meet that became famous in the 275s when Kirk Kowalski started 1,000. That was in Baton Rouge, but after he won the Cal States in April, he went over to the seniors that year and came in second. So, and I know he's benched over 600. He's had really great lifts. He's a close personal friend, and what he's done with the USPA is amazing, because it is by far the premier federation in the United States, which to me, as a fan and a lifter at heart, is the best judging, the best equipment, the best opportunities. You look at the website every month. Every weekend in the country, there's 20 meets nationwide. He probably does over 100 meets. He just did their nationals in Vegas this year. He knows what the lifters want, and he delivers. So it couldn't come from a better person. And like Troy said, he's a great person, and he is a powerlifter's powerlifter. There's nobody that epitomizes powerlifting like Steve Dennison.
Yeah, it's funny. I think on that video, actually, Paul was talking about in one of the comments, somebody like big capital letters is like, "Oh my God, that's Steve Dennison!" Like, I mean, it's like they're watching more to see Steve, because the next time I was like, "Do you need more Steve?" It's like, well, this is my video. Sure, I got plenty more in the library. But what's cool, that's what's the best thing about, though, and I love it, because it's just like in this community itself, I can't state it enough, it's just that you do meet people, and you never know when you're going to see somebody or get somebody on film that becomes a pro. I mean, we got CJ Pierce, he just became a pro not too long ago, and one of our boys from Phoenix, Roy, we tried to get him at the Ubu, but I know he was busy. And he's one, and you've lifted against him at Strongman events, haven't you?
I haven't I lifted against Roy once in Flagstaff, but it was only a half meet.